welcome back, grade 12. We are now in Act 1, Scene 4 of My Children, My Africa, where we now read Mr. M's monologue. And I did explain that in literature, monologues or soliloquy are solely used by the author to express the character's deepest seated emotions, we encountered with Isabel's reflection on scene 2, where she documented and detailed the description of blacks at Blackwater, as well as in comparison to her lifestyle and the lifestyles between black and white, the contrast between black and white. Now here, after Mr. M's inviting Isabel to the literature quiz, and also having given the audience a glimpse into his character traits, being a traditionalist and also being authoritative over Tammy, that he doesn't see the need to invite Tammy, but indeed he's going to instruct Tammy because he has his best interest at heart, but that can also be futile because he does not even have an idea that Tammy is at that point in time not certain as to whether he was going to continue or study further, and he's also have change of perception, if not change of hearts, regarding school. Now, Mr. M's monologue is moments after Mr. M succeed in getting Isabel to partner with Tammy for Grahamstown School English Literature Quiz. He tells the audience about his life and his passion for education. So the nub or the central idea around this expression in the monologue is to get to know his life and also his passion for education in this monologue. Now, what happens and who is involved? Mono means one. Mr. M begins by talking about Confucius' idea on life. I claim him as my teacher. He says that on page 61. And then in your books, it stated that Confucius was Chinese philosopher and teacher who lived from the 505 to 479 before Christ. The philosophy of Confucius emphasizes on humanist, loyalty to one's nature, morality, justice, and virtue. So he familiarizes, if not he vows to live by these principles of Confucius. He tells about Confucius' life. He says that his life is divided between the matchbox of his room. We get to know where he lives, he's renting a room, and the matchbox that is his classroom. So we must understand the symbolical representation or this of representation of this matchbox. And the literal meaning of the matchbox here, it refers to the size of the classroom at Zolila High School, as well as the size of Mr. M's room at Reverend Mbopa's house, where she's renting that room. These rooms are relatively small, hence they are compared to a matchbox. Now, the figurative meaning of the matchbox symbolizes the suffering and the misery of black people that were, or the suffering that black people were subjected to, given the size of the classroom and the size of the room Mr. M rented at Reverend Mbopa's house, being compared to the size of a matchbox. You can see how a matchbox is so small. It symbolizes poverty, oppression, racial segregation, and limited opportunities because they were living in cramped spaces. So please know the symbolical representation of the symbolical importance of the matchbox as referred to by Mr. M in this monologue. He stresses the idea that if a person pursues knowledge, he then forgets all sorrows and other worries and anxiety in life. Mr. M asserts that he cannot rest easy. His worry cannot be ignored because of what is happening to his people. He recognizes the injustices in his country and his troubled and this troubles him greatly. He describes his situations of constant inner confusion as being like a zoo full of mad, hungry animals. He extends the metaphor to say one of the animals represents hope, has broken out this, he says, this is why he is a teacher, to keep this hope alive. So he uses the zoo with the wild animals as a metaphorical representation of his state of mental being, that the animals represent, some animals will represent madness, some how hungry is, how confused he is, but we have animals also that represent hope, or gives him hope, which in the context of the play, hope in the sense it's through education, and provide the provision of good education to his students. Now, furthermore, in this monologue, Mr. M quotes Confucius, who said that the love for knowledge led him to forget food, sadness, and even old age. But Mr. M jokes that he hasn't managed to forget these things and might be the only black Confucian around. He reads and rereads a short book about Confucius, who is full of wisdom. For instance, in old age, Confucius told his disciples that he could do whatever his heart prompted him to without acting immorally. And Mr. M thinks it would be amazing to live like that, with freedom and a clear conscience. If I were just to quote from the book, I think it should be on page 61, where I quote, he says that I claim him as my teacher because I have read very carefully and many times, and I will read it many times more, a little book I have about him, his life, his thoughts and utterances. Truly they are wonderful words words, my friend, wonderful words. My classroom motto comes from its pages, which says, learning undigested by thought is labor lost. Thought unassisted by learning in perilous. But the words that challenge me most these days is something he said towards the end of his life. At the age of 70, he turned to his people one day and said that he could do whatever his heart prompted him without transgressing what was right. This is in page 61, and it further shows that how he affectionately associated or is passionate or motivated by Confucius philosophy, if not ideologies. Now, philosophy means the ideas. Now, every day in the location, Mr. M sees things so horrible that the newspaper can't even print them. This is what he says in this monologue. Because of the brutal violence and hardship he sees, he can't totally trust his instincts. Unlike Confucius, Mr. M's heart is like that of a zoo, which is a metaphor full of unruly animals, including hate. This metaphor is used to explain Mr. M's deep-seated emotions, which also coupled with the emotions of hate, the emotions of despair, and especially that of hope, with the only of hope that only keeps him alive by through teaching. So this further also reveals the depth of his passion for teaching and transforming young lives through education. Sometimes he feels like he's sacrificing young people to feed this monstrous hope. He's 57, and we got to know his age, and we got to also know that he is unmarried, and he lives out of a tiny room, as I've already explained, the symbolical representation of a matchbox here. His entire life takes place between his room and the school. He's constantly rushing back to and fro from the two places, because this when it comes to making history, time cannot be wasted. So in essence, when we analyze this monologue, Mr. M hopes that he can inspire young people through education in the same way that he is unlikely to be a role model, like the Chinese philosopher Confucius has inspired him to pursue wisdom and moral perfection. At the same time, Mr. M recognizes that he falls short of Confucius' ideal, if not ideas. This also reveals that Mr. M recognizes his weaknesses, if not his own limitations, and views education, therefore, as self-improvement and lifelong process. That is just the gist and essence of Mr. M's monologue, where he reveals his deepest seated fears and emotions by also going further, comparing himself to a zoo with wild animals, but hanging or clinging to that emotion of hope that perhaps through education things can change for the better. And what things, remember, in literature you cannot afford to have statements loosely such as saying things. We can't say things, but we would say circumstances would change. And in the context of the play, we are referring to circumstances of the inequalities brought forth by the apartheid regime. So in essence, that is Mr. M's monologue in the scene. And then the theme is a theme of inequalities, like that in the matchbox, the theme of justice and injustice. And the style here is a monologue. And the diction and figurative expression, I want to drive your attention to the metaphor. Explaining the state of his troubled heart, Mr. M says that his heart jumps out and savages him on page 62. His heart is given the qualities of a beast in a metaphor. The monologue contains a strong metaphor. His emotions are compared to a zoo that keeps mad animals. I've got a whole zoo in here, a mad zoo of hungry animals. In page 62, he's frightened by all his feelings, the way that a zookeeper would be if the zoo was filled with mad and hungry animals. He names the animals despair, hate, and hope, because those are the feelings he is struggling with. So he is vacillating between these feelings as stated here. But hope puts Mr. M in danger of being disappointed. This makes the hope he feels for a better future for his learners as difficult to deal with as the hate and despair he feels about the apartheid system. He uses personifications to strengthen his anger against the injustices of apartheid and says that hope has broken out, more like a person who runs out. He gives hope human quality with the ability to run out because it can no longer be controlled. So in essence, this is Mr. M's monologue.